Hi, I'm Karen Das. Welcome to my podcast. You can check out my website, karendas.com, for more podcast episodes and links to my YouTube channel, Twitter, Instagram, and radio shows. March 8th, International Women's Day, a day to acknowledge the sacrifice, the work, the commitment, and the success of outstanding women. In 2021, our theme, Choose to Challenge. Challenge what exactly? Stereotypes and bias. Well, it seems like we've been challenging these for a very long time, but things are happening and the work continues. Now, being in the media, specifically radio, I took the time to think about the women who were in radio in the early days. Were there many? Who were they? And what's their story? Well, my curiosity led me to a veteran broadcaster journalist. She tells me she's no longer involved in radio and television as before, but she is still very much a part of media and communications. I'm happy to share with you part of my conversation with Josanne Leonard. Her thoughts, her words, her memories, her work.
Thank you very much, Karen. And very special welcome as well to all your listeners and I suppose viewers as well. Viewers as well. Yeah.
So a lot of folks, when I said that I have an interview today with Josanne Leonard, the question popped up, oh my gosh, where is she? What is she up to?
Oh my God.
So tell us about the work that you're doing today.
Well, I mean, the work that I do today is the work that I've always done. But, because what underpins what I do is really about Caribbean civilization, Caribbean culture, Caribbean confidence. So maybe I'm not in front of the camera and behind the microphone. Actually, I do miss it. I wish I was doing a lot more, and maybe I will be because the technology, as we were talking, enables that. But it's still shifting a little bit. Media and communication is a big part of that. And of course, even that game or gig has changed with the advent and the proliferation of social media in particular. I continue to be involved in Caribbean development issues and using my voice and my expertise as it relates to strategy, as it relates to advocacy, and as it relates to always pushing the envelope for doing things which are in our best interest, in whichever sphere I may find myself. But communications is at the heart of it.
And that's why you started it?
My advent into media, if I'm allowed to give the 10-cent tour, was actually, I first auditioned, when I was still in my teens, I auditioned for Radio 610 in Trinidad. I was very brash with myself, thinking, well, those days people would say, you have a lovely voice. It was a big thing. You have a nice voice. And so I interviewed at Radio 610 with their San Fernando office. Leo De Leon was the person in charge. And they used to give you these scripts to read, and I kind of went through the new scripts and what have you, but they used to always, the trick thing, like, oh, you have trick questions, would be the classical names. And I never forget it. I mispronounced Vorjak. I didn't know who the hell or what the hell Vorjak was, and I don't know what I said, but maybe I tried to do it phonetically or something. And he gave me a nice little pat on the back and he says, you have some potential and what have you, and come again. And then, life took me to wherever, and I was flying. I don't know for sure if it was him, but Dick Henderson was actually on a flight. I was flying with TTAS between Trinidad and Tobago. And I used to love to do the briefings. And my briefings used to be more than the standard safety briefing. I would give them the tour as we were going over, saying, we're now going over Waterfield Estate, and give them a little bit of the history. I thought it made the little flight interesting. And he mentioned something to me about my presence on the PA. And I kind of put it there. But I remembered him because, of course, he was somebody that I would have seen in media. And then a few years after, I had the opportunity. I flew for about five years, going into 6 years. And Gail Binley-Taylor was at Radio Trinidad, and she was of the younger generation. And she was going off to Jamaica, Carimac, to do her degree. And so there was a permanent temporary position at Radio Trinidad, and I auditioned. And I thought I would be like Bobby Thomas. And if people don't know who Bobby Thomas was, he was an airline captain, but he was really one of the finest broadcasters that we had. So he juggled the two careers. And I thought, well, I would be like Bobby. I could continue to fly in and I could do radio with it. But Mr. Blackman was not having it. He wanted someone on staff, and so I gave up my job in the airline to actually pursue this new adventure in radio. And it was a beautiful time, really. I mean, there are people like Barbara Assoon who passed last year. Barbara Assoon was there, Selma Ai was there, Brenda De Silva was at Radio 610. Before that, we had people like Denise Gomes. And so, there were women who were in broadcasting. And I thought, well, this was the greatest job in the world. Greatest job in the world. And yeah, so that was my start.
What was your first show?
Shift announcer.
Yeah, it starts like that.
And you have to wait, and you have to go into the studio with, in that time it was, except Rennie, because Rennie Bishop used to OA. Now everybody OAs, but, so you'd be in the announcer's booth, and you have the operator's booth, and I'd sit in the studio, and you have to be doing the log, you have to be, because they paid attention to those things, eh? So you have to do the log for whoever you were understudying. I never used to get a little Bly to do a little station ID or something.
Really?
Whereas the guys like Jeffrey Stanford and Edison Carr, Emmett Hennessy, they would glad to, say, okay, you have a trainee. You could read the news headlines. I used to always do it with Rennie Bishop. Because he didn't like to read, or he wasn't as good a reader at that time. He was more the disc jockey kind of person. I used to love to be on Rennie's shift. If I was scheduled for the 12 to 6 shift on Radio Trinidad, I happy like puppy.
12 to 6?
Well, yeah, 6-hour shifts.
Wow.
So that, because then I know from the time he came on, his show started he was 1 to 4. Mm-hmm. So I will have the 1 o'clock headlines, the 2 o'clock headlines, the 3 o'clock headlines. 4 o'clock was major newscast. No, you'd have to have a nice announcer who would be willing to think, well, you would get a chance to read the major news. So yeah, I mean, it was shift continuity for a while, doing the logs, and then eventually being scheduled as part of, the broadcast day. You get a time slot. Of course, being the most junior, I got a lot of the graveyard shifts from 6 to midnight, where you only coming in basically tape after tape after tape, headlines at 7, and station IDs. So people like in Radio Trinidad, there was a particular operator called Ainsley Popwell who lives in the US. And we both, I love music and a range of music, but he was a jazz lover and I'm a jazz lover as well. So he said, make sure that before our shift started, he had a decent pile of records. Spyro Gyra, this one, that one, so that in between all of these boring programs on tape, if you walked into the studio, as happened on occasion, the late Mr. Francis, who became the program director after Mr. Blackman died, he would walk in, oh my, what's going on in here? Because we were just like rocking up a storm with the music and singing to the top of our voices and the rest of it. So it was good fun.
So we had a lot of programming when you were there designed for women?
I wouldn't, I don't think that I recall programming designed for women per se. Certainly not in radio. I just think that it was programming across the board. I don't know that heightened gender sensitivity to the extent to which one wanted to create women or, female or women-specific content was contemplated. Although I'm sure that, particularly with the male announcers, they all had big fan bases, and most of the times it's women who like them. You know what I mean? So I think maybe in that sort of vicarious way, I could be corrected, but certainly at Radio Trinidad, I don't recall during those days when I was on the air there that we were doing women-specific program. There'll be specials and that kind of thing, but there wasn't that kind of focus. And even in terms of the current affairs issues, and so it didn't have the kind of prominence at the time as it did in subsequent years.
You had a lot of women in management?
At Radio Trinidad at the time, no. No, at 610 had, Brenda was pretty senior as an announcer, and she went into management. I think the 90s and so began to see more and more women moving into positions of management in media. But I mean, the newsrooms and to some degree the announced the shifts and that kind of thing. You know, women were part of that.
A colleague said to me when she knew that I was coming to meet with you, she said she and her sister used to look at Dateline
Hmm.
and they would pretend to be hosts and she would pretend to be you.
Oh God, I need to meet her.
She would pretend to be you and read the news. So
Right.
they had their own little show, but she would call herself Josanne Leonard.
Oh, really?
When you
That's so
hear
sweet.
something like that, how
Oh
do
my
you
God, that
feel?
is so sweet. That is, I mean, because um, you know, sometimes in our environment, and it's not just only in media, that we have a propensity to not forget the past, but not to honor the shoulders on whose shoulders we stand. I think that we don't take the longer view of ourselves sometimes, which is a bit unfortunate. So for me, when I went into broadcasting, if I bring it up specifically to this, but this is applicable across the board, um, I knew who Denise Gomes was. And the day that I got to sit on a set with Denise Gomes was like, it was reverence because she went before me. I had tremendous admiration for her. She was a classy lady. She had gone off to England. And in an incarnation of Dateline, she comes back and we call it the Gemini trio because I am Gemini, Wilbert Holder, who became the main anchor, was Gemini, and Denise Gomes, Gemini. And it was a fantabulous time because they were bringing to the table a very strong sense of their own persona, not as I'm a personality. But Wilbert was an accomplished actor. You know, he was involved in the Trinidad Theatre Workshop. He was well read. He'd originally come from Guyana. He was a true Caribbean man, you know. Denise was, again, you know, there was more going into their brain than the sort of trite or, you know, whatever is popular on social media. So I had reverence. I mean, I had deep respect for Dale Colasing and Jai Parasram and you know, the people who were there before me. And you knew who they were, and you knew that you were being given an opportunity to participate in a profession that had the ability to have such a profound impact on the country, but that people who were really, really very accomplished in their thinking. And so when you listen to them speak, I suppose when you get old enough as I am, you maybe say the golden age of broadcasting, but I think it really was a golden age of broadcasting.
We have a lot more females in media today.
Yeah.
Um,
A lot
do
more
you
women.
A
Yeah.
lot more women.
Yeah.
Do you think that's making a positive impact?
I have no idea. I'll be very honest. I have no idea. I mean, we have surveys that take place from time to time. I don't know, in relation to women, I would make a more general comment. I think that we're found lacking in terms of, if you will, training so that people have a better understanding of what it is that they do. Media is like could be a weapon of mass destruction, or it could be a weapon that helps to elevate a society in all kinds of ways, which does not run afoul of free speech, of critical thinking, of hard-nosed investigation, of commentary. They're not in two different universes at all, but it's how it's done. And so I can't answer the question as women because I think a lot of times women get into positions and do exactly the same crap that maybe was a predominant feature of a male dominated profession or situation, and they behave just like them. So the fact that you have more numbers doesn't necessarily equate with having better quality, more gender sensitive eyes. I don't see that as being positive at all. And it doesn't self correct by having more numbers. It self corrects by having uh, more philosophy, more understanding and grounding in what we need, what we do.
You were involved in activism from a very young age. You were in high school
Yeah.
when you got involved in.
This is the 50th anniversary of the National Organization of Revolutionary Students, which I was a founding member of. And our big campaign 50 years ago was our Free Our Soldiers campaign, when Rafiq Shah, Rex LaSalle, Mike Bazzi, and others were part of the mutiny at Tetron. And it's 50 years this year. We had a heightened and concentrated period of activism around that particular campaign that gave us a lot of prominence, but a lot of us came out of the National Joint Action Committee. And that year, a number of us were arrested we were gathering for a meeting at Woodbrook Secondary, which was a very, very vibrant school, had a very vibrant student community. And quite a few of us were under the legal age. And in fact, we're having a little convening because, with the passage of time, you had to fact check yourself and your own recollections. So we're having a meeting around that soon because it's something to commemorate. One of our legal advisors was the late, great Lennox Pear, an incredible, incredible human being. And he played such a role in public life here. He was one of the founders of the early steel band movement and that kind of thing. But I came from that background. My dad was very involved in social activism and eventually trade union politics. When he was in England working, he was very much involved in the anti-apartheid movement, etc. And then came back here, and he became the research and education officer at the OWTU. And then he and Rafiq in the early 70s formed the rival union to TICFA, Trinidad Island White Cane Farmers Association. They did a lot of work to mobilize cane farmers and sugar workers. And so I have a lot of that under my belt. And I mean, living with him and being around him exposed us to a lot to thinking and also events. And so, I mean, I know what a picket line is, and like we were them fellas on a picket line, and we were little. I mean, these are big men, and they play in wapi and rumi and bubbling a fish broth and all them kind of things, And then NJAC, which was a tremendous amount of mobilization. NJAC did a phenomenal amount of work even post the 70 period, which unfortunately is still understated and unrecognized, but it focused a lot on human development. And if we had more of that in the society, we would have less of the violence and dislocation that we're seeing now, for sure.
You miss those days?
I've never stopped being an activist in my own way. Anybody who knows me well enough knows that I'm going to be the one pushing the envelope.
What's next for Josanne Leonard?
I don't know, girl. I mean, every day is I don't know, plenty Netflix.
Apparently.
No, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm a voracious reader. Not enough fictional work, so I'm trying to correct that. I just got a book in from the US, a friend sent it to me, Mario Andrade. I read, like I'm on blogs, on Medium, and a lot of what I would call maybe alternative thinking to mainstream media, because I can't take sometimes the fact that everybody is saying the same thing. I'm a person who lives in my head in ideas. I love this region that we come from. I'm the only one of my siblings who doesn't have a foreign passport. I love mentoring. I love sharing. I think that there's so much that I like intergenerational dialogue. I think we have very little of that. But it's just a journey, it's whatever presents itself today. But I use my heart and my mind always to think of us as Trinbagonians and Caribbean people. That's so freaking powerful. It's not funny if we only understood it. That's pretty amazing. And I've lived long enough in a time where I've had glimpses of people like George Lamming, who's still alive, Clyde Walcott, who I had the benefit of interviewing, P.J. Patterson, who I had the benefit of interviewing, Fidel Castro, who I saw up close and personal, and I was almost going to touch him and realize that somebody might floor my backside because they might think I was going to attack him. And many others in between, and to use my voice, which I've not been using in the literal sense, to enable conversations.
Well, this has been Appetite for Discussion TT. Look out for more on my conversation with Josanne Leonard and so many others like her who continue to inspire.